Welcome to the Depth Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're really getting into something foundational, aren't we? Plato's Phaedrus. We're using the translation and commentary you've brought along.
We are, and it's quite a journey. I mean, just imagine it for a second. You're there, sitting under a plane tree just outside Athens. It's cool, shady.
Away from the city bustle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're with Socrates and his young friend Phaedrus. And Phaedrus has got this scroll, like the hot new thing, a speech by the famous orator Lysias. That's literally where we start.
Right, and it kicks off with this talk about love, specifically Lysias making this kind of wild argument against choosing a lover. But it doesn't stay there, does it?
Oh, not at all. It spirals outwards fast into really big questions. What are humans all about? What's the soul? What even is good communication? How do we know what we know?
Or think we know.
Precisely. It weaves philosophy, myth, psychology, even a pretty sharp critique of public speaking and writing itself.
So our mission today, let's try and unpack the really core ideas here. Pull out the arguments, maybe some surprising ones, find those timeless bits in this, let's face it, pretty complex text.
Yeah, cut through the weeds, get to the heart of it.
Let's unpack this.
Okay.
So the setting itself is significant. Socrates, he's not really a country guy.
Not typically, no.
He says it himself, he's drawn out of Athens, not because he loves the scenery, but just because, people are his teachers. Knowledge comes from people.
That's so key. And Phaedrus gets this. He knows the only way to tempt Socrates outside the walls is with words, with discourse. This speech is the bait.
It's like waving, a juicy argument in front of him.
Exactly. And straight away, Socrates shows he doesn't have much patience for certain kinds of talk. Phaedrus mentions a local myth, Boreas and Oreithia.
And Socrates just brushes it off.
Pretty much. He says trying to rationalize all these old stories with, clever interpretations, it's a waste of time. Calls it an uncritical philosophy.
So what should we study then, according to him?
Well, he says the proper study of mankind is man. Simple as that. He needs to figure himself out first. Is he some kind of complex monster or something simpler before getting lost in unearthly monsters from myths?
Self-knowledge before myth knowledge? Makes sense. Sets the stage.
Definitely. It loops back to the human soul again and again.
Okay, so Phaedrus reveals the bait. Lysias' speech, arguing that a young person should, counterintuitively, go for a non-lover instead of a lover.
Right. And Phaedrus lays out Lysias' points. They're surprisingly practical, almost cold, really.
What's the main logic there? Why the non-lover?
Well, Lysias argues basically that the non-lover is more rational, more stable. Their affection isn't based on this, fiery passion that's going to burn out.
So less drama.
Less drama, less suspicion, less hurt, less boasting, less taking over your entire life.
And he mentions, practical benefits, too.
Oh, yeah. More non-lovers to choose from, so better odds of finding a good match, a good friend.
A bigger dating pool logic.
Yeah. Kind of. Plus, the non-lover won't suddenly resent the kindness they showed you because they weren't acting out of some, overwhelming compulsion. They chose freely.
Right, they haven't messed up their own life or neglected friends for you.
Exactly. Less baggage, maybe. And they're less likely to brag about it or care more about what people think than the actual connection.
Socially smoother, too, he argues.
Yeah, their meetings aren't viewed suspiciously. And, interestingly, they're supposedly less jealous of your other friends, like wealthy or smart companions. They see them as beneficial to you, not rivals.
Because it's not that possessive, all-consuming thing.
Precisely. So the argument goes, a friendship built on merit, before any favors, is just more likely to last. It's very cool-headed.
Okay, so Socrates hears all this. What's his take? He's Mr. Connection, Mr. Philosophy of Love, sort of?
He's underwhelmed. With the actual argument, the matter, he finds it a bit unmeaning. But he does notice the style, the form.
How so?
He points out, Lysias repeats himself. Seems like he maybe wrote it in a hurry. It's polished on the surface, but...
But Phaedrus is totally wowed by the fancy words, the beauty of the periods.
He is. He loves the rhetoric, which is exactly why he pushes Socrates.
Ah, this is where Socrates gets roped in.
Completely. Phaedrus basically says, okay, wise guy, you think you can do better? Prove it. Give me a better speech on the same topic, arguing the same thing.
And he threatens him.
With the ultimate Socrates weapon. If you don't, I'll never share another speech with you ever again.
That'd work.
It does. Socrates pretends to be reluctant, makes a show of it, blames the nymphs of the place for inspiring him, but he agrees.
Okay, so Socrates takes on the persona of the non-lover. But ironically.
Yes, he explicitly says he's a lover all the same, so we know he's putting on a mask.
Hmm.
And he starts by defining love in this speech, mind you.
And it's not a pretty picture.
Not at all. He calls it an irrational desire, an intemperance, an excess, driven purely by enjoying physical beauty, and it just, steamrolls reason.
So he echoes Lysias's points about the lover being bad news.
He does, but with more, rhetorical punch, more drama. He says the lover makes the beloved soft, effeminate, can't handle any kind of superiority in them, trains them in luxury.
Isolates them.
Totally isolates them. Cuts them off from good influences, family, friends, even knowledge or money, just to keep them dependent. Calls the lover disagreeable, intrusive, always swinging between flattery and criticism.
Especially when drunk, he adds.
Right. And that memorable line, crabbed age and youth cannot live together. It paints a really grim picture of the relationship.
And the ending is harsh, too.
Absolutely chilling. When the passion fades, the lover often just flips because an enemy abandons the person they supposedly adored.
That's where the wolf and lamb simile comes in.
As wolves love lambs, so lovers love their loves.
Yeah.
It's incredibly stark, a predatory image.
And Socrates himself notices he's getting carried away with his own eloquence here.
He does. He says he's getting into dithyrambics, like this wild poetic frenzy, even heroics. He blames the holy place, the nymphs again, then he stops himself. Says he's said it enough on the negative side, feels overtaken by the nymphs.
The perfect moment to switch gears.
Exactly. Because right after, he feels this wave of guilt, remorse.
He thinks the speeches were bad, both his and Lysias'.
Worse than bad.
Yeah.
Dreadful. Impious, he says. Because they treated love, capital L, a god, a divine force, as something evil.
So he needs to fix it, like Stesichorus and Helen of Troy.
Precisely. Stesichorus insulted Helen, was blinded, then wrote a retraction, a palinode, and got his sight back. Socrates feels he owes love a palinode now.
And this is where things get really interesting. He introduces divine madness.
Yes. This is huge. He says, hold on, not all madness is an illness or an evil. Some forms of madness are actually a divine gift, a source of the chiefest blessings for humanity.
Okay, divine madness, like what?
He lists 4 types. First, the madness of prophecy, divination. He cleverly links the Greek words mantique, prophecy, and madness.
Clever wordplay.
Second, the kind of madness involved in religious rituals, mysteries, that brings purification. Third, the poetic madness, the inspiration from the muses that lets poets create.
And the fourth? Don't tell me.
Yep. The fourth kind of divine madness is love.
Wow. Okay, so love is up there with prophecy and poetry now. That completely flips the script from the first 2 speeches.
Totally. And he says to understand this kind of love madness, we have to understand the soul.
Which he argues is immortal because it moves itself.
Exactly. It's self-moving. That's its fundamental nature, the fountain and beginning of motion for everything.
Which leads to that amazing image, the chariot.
The winged chariot, probably the most famous bit of the dialogue. The soul as a charioteer driving 2 winged horses.
One good horse, one bad horse.
Sort of. One is noble, white, strives upward. You can think of it like reason or spirit. The other is dark, unruly, drags downward, representing our baser passions, appetites.
And the goal is to fly upwards.
The goal is to follow the gods in a great procession in the heavens, where the soul can glimpse the eternal, perfect forms or ideas, absolute justice, temperance, and especially absolute beauty.
But the bad horse makes it hard work.
Incredibly hard. If the charioteer and the good horse are strong, they can manage the bad one and get those glimpses of truth. But if the bad horse dominates, the wings falter, they lose altitude, and the soul falls to earth, forgetting much of what it saw.
Okay, so where does love fit back into this picture?
This is the genius part, that divine madness of love. It's triggered when someone on earth encounters physical beauty that reminds the soul of the true, absolute beauty it glimpsed in that heavenly realm.
It's a memory trigger.
Exactly. Yeah. And that memory, that sudden recollection, is so powerful, it causes the soul's wings, which had been damaged or lost, to start growing back. It creates this yearning, this striving to return to that higher realm.
So the madness isn't destructive anymore, it's restorative. It drives you towards philosophy.
Precisely. The madness of love for beauty kickstarts the philosophical journey, the soul's ascent back towards contemplating the true forms. It's the engine of recollection.
What a turnaround from wolves loving lambs.
It's immense. He contrasts the heavenly blessings that can come from the lover's divine madness with the merely vulgar qualities and worldly prudence offered by the non-lover.
And he ends this second speech asking love for forgiveness.
Yes, a prayer to love asking forgiveness, asking for the true art of love, and playfully blaming Lysias again for leading them down the wrong path initially.
It completely elevates the whole thing, from dating advice to the soul's journey.
It really does.
So, having given these two very different speeches, Socrates says, okay, let's use these as case studies. Let's figure out what makes for good or bad rhetoric, the actual art of it.
And he starts by, well, taking apart Lysias' speech again. What was wrong with it, fundamentally?
First big problem, no definition. He never actually defined love at the beginning.
Crucial omission. And then the structure was all over the place. No real order, like a nursery rhyme, Socrates says. He even began at the end, talking about love ending.
So if that's bad rhetoric, what's good composition? Socrates links this to dialectic, right?
Yes, he says the core skills belong to dialectic, which is more fundamental than just rhetoric. He outlines two key processes. First, synthesis.
Synthesis, like bringing things together.
Exactly. Taking all the scattered examples or instances of something and grasping the single unifying idea or definition that covers them all. Seeing the one in the many.
Okay, and the second?
Analysis, which is the opposite, really. Taking that unified whole, that concept, and dividing it properly into its natural parts or species, like carving at the joints, he says, not just hacking it apart.
Seeing the many within the one.
Right. And these two processes, collection and division, that's the heart of dialectic. Person who can do this well, who can see this one in many. In reality, Socrates calls a dialectician almost a king among thinkers.
So rhetoric, as it was commonly taught, just missed this foundation. All those fancy terms.
Yeah, he lists them off. Theodorus, Lysias, Gorgias, all their techniques. The intro, stating facts, proofs, probabilities, refutation, making insinuations, emotional appeals, summing up.
Sounds like a public speaking one-on-one checklist.
And Socrates says, look, that stuff is just the tools, the preliminary conditions. It's like knowing the names of all the parts of a chariot, but not knowing how to actually assemble or drive it. It's not the art itself.
Because it's missing the most important thing.
Knowledge. Knowledge of the truth about the subject, and crucially, knowledge of human nature, of the soul.
Like knowing medicine requires knowing the body.
Perfect analogy. True rhetoric, he says, is the art of enchanting the soul with arguments. And to do that properly, scientifically, you need to know the truth about your topic.
And you need to understand souls.
Yes. Understand that there are different kinds of souls, so many, and of such a nature, he puts it. You need to be able to classify souls, classify speeches, and know which type of speech or argument will actually persuade which type of soul.
Tailoring the message.
Exactly.
Right.
And knowing the right timing, the right moment, when to speak, when to be silent, when to use different styles. It takes talent, sure, but it absolutely requires philosophy, real knowledge, and practice.
So it's a science of the soul applied through speech.
That's the ideal. Which is why he's so critical of rhetoricians like Lysias, who say, forget truth, just go with what's probable, what the audience is likely to believe.
The fake it till you make it school of persuasion.
Pretty much. Making the weaker argument seem stronger, confusing good and evil, just playing on appearances. Socrates insists that even to manipulate appearances well, you first need to know the truth they resemble or distort.
And the goal isn't just winning the argument in court.
No, the true orator, the philosopher speaker, aims higher. Their goal is to speak in a way that is acceptable to God, to align with truth and goodness, not just to flatter or manipulate fellow servants, meaning other people. It's a higher calling.
This deep dive into rhetoric naturally leads them to writing.
Yes, the other way, words get fixed. Is there a right and wrong way to write? Just like speaking.
And cue another famous myth, Thuth and Thamis.
The Egyptian god Thuth, inventor of many arts, including writing, presents his invention to King Thamis.
Thuth is pretty pleased with himself, right? Says writing is a cure for forgetfulness, a boost for wisdom.
He does. Specific for memory and wit. But King Thamis, this wise ruler figure, he pushes back. He's not convinced.
What's his criticism?
He says, actually, this invention will cause forgetfulness because people will stop using their own internal memory and just rely on these external marks, these letters.
Ouch, so it's not real knowledge.
Thamis argues it provides only the semblance of truth, not truth itself. It helps with reminding people, reminiscence, but not with true, deep understanding. And worse.
Worse.
It'll make people think they know everything because they've read a lot, make them seem omniscient, but they'll actually know nothing deeply. They'll just be full of opinions, not wisdom, and kind of annoying, tiresome company.
That feels oddly relevant today.
Doesn't it? Socrates then compares written words to paintings.
How so?
They look alive, they stand there like they have something to say, but if you ask them a question, silence. They just keep showing the same thing over and over.
And they can't defend themselves?
Now, once a text is written, it gets tumbled about. Read by people who get it, people who don't, people who twist it. It can't clarify, it can't argue back, it can't choose its audience.
So is there a better kind of word?
Yes, Socrates says, the living word, an intelligent word.
What makes it living?
It's graven in the soul of the learner. It's dynamic. It can defend itself in a discussion. It knows its audience, knows when to speak, when to stay silent. It adapts.
This living word, born from dialogue, is the real deal.
It's the living word of knowledge which has a soul, he says. The written word is just an image, a static copy of that living understanding.
So a wise person wouldn't put their most serious thoughts down in writing, like writing in water.
That's the implication for the highest truths. The real way to write, the most fruitful way, is through dialectic implanting principles of justice, goodness, beauty directly into another person's soul through conversation.
Creating legitimate offspring ideas that can actually grow and reproduce in others.
Exactly. Writing might be useful for reminders, for notes, maybe for play. But the real work, the serious cultivation of knowledge and virtue, happens soul to soul in living dialogue.
Okay, so wrapping this part up, what distinguishes the true philosopher from just, a skilled writer or speech maker?
It comes back to knowledge and dialectic. A true composer, whether of speeches, poems, laws, must know the truth about their subject. They must be able to define and divide concepts correctly using dialectic. And they need that deep understanding of human souls to tailor their communication.
And if they don't have that knowledge, if they just rely on technique or popular opinion,
then Socrates says their work is ultimately disgraceful, a sham, no matter how much applause it gets. Writing or speaking without knowing true justice, goodness, evil, that's the real failure.
the value isn't the text, it's the understanding behind it, the living principle.
Precisely. That knowledge graven in the soul is the real achievement, the speaker's true offspring. Writing is just a reminiscence aid.
So the message to composers is pretty stark.
If you know the truth and you can stand up and defend your ideas in a real back-and-forth argument, dialectic, then you deserve the name philosopher.
And if not,
Then you're just a wordsmith, maybe a flatterer, a putter together of words.
ouch.
Though he does end with a slightly hopeful note about Socrates.
Yeah, he sees potential there. He thinks Socrates, though young and involved in rhetoric, has an element of philosophy in him, a spark that might lead him beyond just persuasive tricks towards something deeper, maybe a hope for integrating the two. Okay, let's shift slightly to the commentary you shared. It uses Plato's critique here to talk about, well, the ups and downs of culture, specifically Greek literature after Plato's time.
It does. It sees Plato's satire on the limitations of mere rhetoric as predicting or diagnosing a kind of decline.
What were the symptoms of this decline, according to the commentary?
Things like monotony setting in, a lack of real genius, of distinctive character in writing, a big focus on just technical rules, on compiling lists and writing commentaries about older works, rather than in creating powerful new substance.
Mistaking the tools for the art itself, like Socrates warned.
Exactly. A loss of critical method, losing political freedom, which impacts expression, philosophy becoming too abstract, maybe losing touch with beauty.
And this wasn't just literature.
No, the commentary suggests you could see similar trends in law becoming chaotic, in politics, just following the crowd, lacking real knowledge, even in medicine, falling into routine, not truly studying human nature, a kind of stagnation.
A dead level, as it puts it. But it wasn't all doom and gloom, right? The commentary sees hope, too.
Definitely. It suggests ways decline might be averted or reversed. Things like the spread of education, better methods, wider access, maybe unlocking potential in more people.
Education building over generations.
Yeah. Educated parents raising kids better prepared. And global communication. Thoughts of men are widened. Access to different cultures, different ways of thinking.
More leisure time for people to think.
As mentioned. Also, a growing sense of nature's complexity pushing us towards bigger ideas. A broader sense of humanity beyond just nationalism.
Fewer prejudices, maybe a better grasp on truth.
Hopefully. And importantly, looking back, studying the past, the commentary believes the past holds seeds of revival. We can learn from those high points.
So it ends on a note of maybe cautious optimism, that literature and culture don't just have to fade away.
Right. It suggests that with wider knowledge sharing, better understanding, maybe increased cooperation among thinkers, multitude of intelligences, there's potential for renaissance, not just decline.
Okay, let's try and bring this all home. We've journeyed through love, madness, the soul, rhetoric, writing. What does Plato's Phaedrus really say to us now, in our time? We're swimming in written words, digital messages, constant persuasion attempts.
It's uncanny how relevant it feels, isn't it?
Right.
Plato, through Socrates, takes us from this, seemingly specific debate about relationships, right to the foundations. What is truth? What is the soul? How do we truly connect and communicate?
We got that sharp critique of communication that's just about surface tricks, probabilities, winning the argument, rather than substance and truth.
And the championing of that harder path, dialectic, defining, dividing, really understanding who you're talking to, and speaking from a place of actual knowledge.
And then there's that really challenging idea about the written word. That maybe, just maybe, it's not the ultimate form of communication. That it might be less alive, less potent than knowledge truly embedded in someone's understanding through real interaction.
Yeah, that one really makes you think, especially today. Plus, the commentary's point about how cultures can stagnate when they lose touch with deep truths and value technique over substance, but also how revival is possible through education and connection.
So here's the rub, maybe. Think about all the stuff you read, watch, listen to every day. How much of it genuinely feels like it's trying to get at truth, trying to understand the nature of the soul, as Socrates would put it.
Versus how much is just using, clever rhetoric, playing on emotions, using statistics or appeals to popularity to persuade you without that deeper grounding.
So here's a final thought to chew on. In this age of, well, just endless content, endless streams of information, endless digital echoes, are we focusing enough on cultivating that living word?
The kind of interaction and learning that builds real defensible understanding and wisdom that connects us deeply soul to soul.
Or are we maybe getting caught up in collecting the digital equivalent of what Socrates might call semicolons and adverbs, just gathering information, mastering the tools, the platforms, the formats, without always engaging in the harder, richer art of genuine knowledge-based communication?
Are we mistaking the image for the reality?
Something to definitely think about.
Indeed. Until our next deep dive.
Until next time.